So you found us.
What is it trying to tell us?
No strings, no catch. You own everything.
Now stay tuned to Rock Flux.
And a bright good morning to you. Tony Caravan with you.
Good morning.
It's 4:04 in my neck of the woods, as I say. And I got up at 3. I think I might have the plague, folks. Here's my caffeine for the morning. So yeah, if I look a little gnarly, that's it. First shot of caffeine. I wanted to show you this. I left this on here. This is that, one of those plastic things, that are on a 6-pack. And, people say, slice these up into a million pieces because they get into turtles or birds or whatever. And I think I mentioned this once before. The problem I have with that is that what are they doing in the ocean and the beach anyway, right? In the first place. And I'm not going to get into that whole rant again, but the idea was that these governors in these coastal states, they basically just have a fine, which is nothing more than a slap on the wrist to these garbage companies that the state government regulates and licenses, that they allow to take these garbage barges out into the offshore and dump. I remember many years ago there were like needles, medical waste was coming up in like North Jersey, and there was a big stink about that. But they're still finding all this stuff with like birds and turtles and animals and stuff. And I'm not talking about like that island of plastic out in the mid Pacific, which is basically, it was another government problem, but that was more on a federal level. But I think some of the states were involved in that. In other words, people were actually shipping their garbage to China, and China was supposedly had like all these low wage slave labor people sifting through garbage and were recycling it, and probably also looking for those credit card offers that people get and stealing and doing identity theft. But in reality, what they were doing was they just couldn't handle the load of the amount of trash produced anymore, and they're just dumping it in the ocean. So between the states are allowing garbage companies, trash companies, whatever you want to call them, which they're still like mob. They were always like run by the mob. That was like one of their little side ventures, like is the garbage business. And apart from that happening by these coastal states, then you had this trying to ship the trash out. It's kind of pretty much pretty absurdity. Anyway, the weather for the day today here it's 36 degrees. Yesterday I commented that there was over a 50-degree difference during the daytime. That's not like day to night. Sometimes you see these big temperature shifts, in the middle of the night when it cools down, as opposed to the high point in the day. But no, this is same time day to same time, next day. It was like over a 50-degree difference. And I heard winds last night because I didn't sleep well. Because like I say, I think I'm fighting off this virus or something. And the wind was howling. That means those isobars are close together for you meteorologist nerds. But anyway, it's about 36 degrees, and it looks like we're going to stay in the 30s and maybe get up to the 40s on the weekend. Nights are still, still getting down there. Tonight's going to be in the 20 degrees where I am. And you know what it's like in your neck of the woods. But for those who are interested. I have a new sponsor for the show, and it's I have to do this like the old-fashioned TV, and it is called GreatSolarStuff.com. GreatSolarStuff.com. I've had this website for a long time. I mean, here's what solar used to be like. You know, you'd have to figure out all this wiring, and you might see some of these DIY guys on, on YouTube channels, that are hooking up these controllers and, all these things, how they hook up their batteries and running conduits and all that stuff. Well, on greatsolarstuff.com, and you can go there now. I just have a few items set up there for the time being. But let's just see if we can put this back here. I've got some of these jackery things that are just like, you can carry it around, and they have different, the price points on these things vary. You get one is cheap for like $200 and up to that's just the power pack type of thing itself. In other words, you could actually plug, a thing into it. There's actually outlets on it, and USB, but a standard outlet that you could plug like, whatever, a light, a fan, a thing, a charger. And, so they have them at like 400 watts or a couple hundred watts, all the way up to like over 1,000 watts with peak watts at 200. And the bigger ones, there's one over $1,000 that you get like 2 solar panels with it. But you could buy solar panels, or if you have a solar panel laying around, you can add one to these because they're solar chargeable, but you can have it in your house and plug it in. And these would have come in handy for that power outage, for example, in Texas. I've had this website for like, must be 20 years. And I've been trying to like get this across to people saying, look, this isn't prepping. It's prepping. It's prepping for storms and just a car, sometimes a car hits a pole and, and the power's out for the day or 6 hours, or a transformer blows up and you're without power. And if you have one of these devices, you literally can, operate some basic things in your house, depending on how much you spend and how big a device you get. But even the cheapest model itself, will keep your laptop and your cell phone, operating. And I remember I told a story once about, I had one that when I had direct TV, when I used to watch TV, I got rid of it all now. But I was able to take one once when we had a power failure that lasted overnight. I was able to plug in the direct TV receiver and the TV, because, everything has that energy saver little sticker on it. Things today, that's something that the people in the environment, well, they used to be environmentalists, but now it's like this climate folks that just, they don't understand. They're playing from like a 1960s, 1970s playbook. It's like they are with a lot of that SJW stuff too. Like they don't know that all this, that in the past 50 years, all this stuff happens. And they suddenly discovered like the anarchist guide to, revolution or something. And then they're on these old issues of pollution and how bad fossil fuels are, and stuff. And they just don't realize how that there was a time when the US, you couldn't go into a major city without there being something called smog. Now they still have that in China and places like that. And those people they're not abiding by those Paris Accord rules. Like they don't have to like do anything for a long time. And, they're still building coal plants like one a week or some ridiculous at a fast clip. But, that was the way it was in the US in the 60s, But then we had a big movement. Our highways used to be all littered. And then we had like a big litter movement. and we cleaned up. We did a lot of cleaning up, and to this day they still have an adopt a highway thing. So occasionally you'll find a dirty, some slob that dumps out their trash on the side of a road. But for the most part, at one time when you used to drive down highways, there used to be garbage and cans, beer cans and soda cans, and just stuff all over the place. But this adopt a highway thing and just keep America clean campaigns, over the past 50 years, we've done a lot with that. And we've put scrubbers on all these, a lot of these energy, these big plants. They used to pollute the water. The color of water used to be like bizarre, in the rivers because of all the stuff that was coming out of the various factories. But they forced all those factories to like either sequester it or or filter it, strain it, do whatever. It's the same with the stuff going into the atmosphere. Half these power plants are just pretty much just putting out steam in the air. But people don't know that. And so, they get into this. I mean, that's just a quick aside. And I'm generalizing, there's always people out there that are going to abuse the system, just like these people that dump trash, in the ocean. But what I'm saying is that the solution for a lot of these problems is the government is the solve. In other words, the government is the problem, not the fossil fuel, not the the 6-pack, plastic wrapper top, or the straw somebody wants to use to stay clean, to drink clean out of a can instead of putting your mouth on a can that who knows how many people have touched, right? So it's like, don't ban straws and 6-packs or, soda tops and, plastic soda, whatever you call those things, ban the government officials and fire the government officials, as I always say,
You're fired.
That's what they ought to do. Whoever's in charge, whoever's letting, who's ever in charge of levying the fines on these garbage companies that use it as a cost of doing business. Think of that term. In other words, the fines are so low that it's a cost of doing business for them to dump in the oceans. But yeah, as far as the environment is concerned, I got into that yesterday with the windmills and stuff. The old days, environmentalists were the people pushing energy efficiency and green this and green that. But now when you look at, what these windmills and even these solar reflector farms are doing, they're destroying the environment, killing birds and all that stuff. And just to end that and top it off is what I was saying about these energy savers. You've seen this little blue sticker on most of your appliances you've been buying for the past, I don't know, decade or two. Is that, we don't have picture tubes on televisions and big cathode ray tubes. Excuse me, the first Mac that came out, in fact, I think I have one still, this one, I think it was like used 200 watts. Now the things are lucky if they use, a fifth of that or less. And if they're in, depending on what the draw is on the how much power is being pulled from the board, the processor. So people, that doesn't get reported because the reporters are just news readers and the activists are activists. They just read these old books, or these books just keep getting like reprinted or whatever, or these flyers keep getting passed around and maybe updated by some new graphic designer. But it's like 50-year-old stuff. It's like we are way more energy efficient. We have things called catalytic converters. There were times when cars, there weren't pollution standards in cars. American cars are very much more efficient and cleaner operating than they were 50 years ago, 30 years ago. and like I said, so nobody really thinks about that. And it just that's what I'm saying. I just wish they would tell the truth. You know, like I always say, just give me some truth. That John Lennon line. You know, if they don't, and so because what's the benefit of lying to children and to old people? You know, you get them all riled up and they get crazy, and then you end up in this like whacked out world that we're in right now. You know, it's crazy. It's like I've said before, you know, apparently some people never seem to never got the memo on a lot of things. But they never got the memo that like these SJWs never got the memo that Biden's the president now. So it's like, what do you could stop the propaganda and just tell the truth. But I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between political propaganda, politics, and the truth. See, when you're old enough, you've been through enough of this stuff, and you could ask anybody who's been in politics. And remember, like I said, I lived and worked in Capitol Hill for a little while. And I wasn't a nobody, you know. I actually worked for Roy Cohn, not that he's some high figure, but it was the end of his career. He was old and stuff, but it was enough to see the inside world. You know, there were some politicians and people like that would come to, you know, parties. Anyway, I just want to show you this before I get into this other thing. So you might be familiar with this. That's the classic Tony Caravan. Yeah, that's me. And 21st century beat poet. You know, this was like this was the album cover, like what would have been the album. And on the back of it, like in the old days, there's the lyrics. I have a bunch of these things, and I wish. Thing will probably fall. See if I could lodge it here somewhere. There's like these two weird hooks over here. I should be able to. Yeah. Well, you can't see the face, but you. Oh, kind of. So you can see our new sponsor, Great Solar Stuff, my book, Codex, of course, the morning show, we're on the air, and Tony Caravan's Beat Poetry. So when it says in the beginning, sponsored video or something like that, it's really not paid sponsorship because, I mean, it's just me. It's my stuff. I'm not monetized, so I don't make any money on this video. So if you see it, like I always tell people, if you see a commercial, it's not from me. I don't know who it's from.
Here's what's happening.
Yeah, so these people never they never seem to got the memo. And so the way it works is, here's how politics works. When you can't, I mean, think of like Roger Stone. Okay, a lot of people never misunderstood that guy, for example. I'm hoping this caffeine will wake me up. 4:23 in the morning. And you know, I got the breath thing, had the fatigue. I just ordered a thermometer to see if I have a fever. So I don't know. Yeah, I might have caught this darn thing. I don't know. Maybe not. I'll find out today. Well, I won't find out today. I mean, I'll know if I have a fever today because I got a thermometer coming. I've just been taking heavy doses. I'm taking aspirin. I take my D3. This morning I took a ginseng and a B12 on top of it. I had some cereal, some oats with yogurt, which is supposedly an antiviral food, plain Greek yogurt. And I also put a bunch of cinnamon on there. And cinnamon is another antiviral. And then I'll have a salad, for lunch or later, and I'll chop up garlic, which is a good antiviral, and I'll have things like turmeric. Like I say, always take turmeric with black pepper because that's how you activate it somehow. And so what I've been just doing is I've been going the au natural route of taking all the antivirals I can, trying to get some sleep and rest, and taking aspirins. And I think I managed to get almost 8 hours of sleep last night. It's just that I woke up like 3 times. And I got up to one time. I just had to take 2 aspirins. And seemed to help. But yeah, my breath isn't, I don't know. Who knows? The plague of the century, or did I just catch the common flu? I don't know. It's hard to say. But anyway, getting back to this. So, like the title of this, the title of this video, they didn't get the memo. Is that, the dirty trick politics was always full of dirty tricksters like Roger Stone. That's what he was. They would campaigns would always have guys like that on both sides, Democrats, Republicans. That's just how it works. And what they would do is they leak out weird stuff, lies, scandals, and especially as it gets closer to the election, the whole idea was that there wouldn't be enough time to react. And you would hope that the media would be caught blindsided. Of course, now the media kind of, they propagandize themselves. So you can't, it's a whole different world. But like, the thing is, what I think a lot of people that now that Biden's in don't realize is that many of these so-called issues that they were bringing up to just inflame people or to get people excited to get out and vote, they weren't real. They weren't like, and so they just these people didn't, they're naive to the ways of politics, and nobody, and obviously nobody's going to come out except me and tell them this and say, you have to understand, you didn't get, like I say, you didn't get the memo. That's all that stuff pre-election was just, just to make the other guy look bad and your guy look good. It wasn't to actually implement that stuff. The goal wasn't to, have people freezing, have a storm come and people freezing to death in the South and stuff because no. And the idea is that, so people don't understand that. And this idea of this social justice warrior, whatever, I never even understood what that was all about. Warriors, it's like protesters, people with their little tiny cardboard signs with magic markers on, marker slogans on it. I mean, these people are in their 30s. They're like the Peter Pan generation, and they're playing like little kids. And of course, in the schools, they torment these kids because the kids don't know anything, and they tell the kids this stuff and they scare them half to death. But you take that so far. There's a picture on the title card of an old picture of a bunch of beautiful. It's too bad it's too small on the title card, but a bunch of beautiful girls on a beach, and somewhere on the West Coast. And it's like, yeah, that, you want the, you want to get back to normal. Let's get back to normal. Man, I can't wait till the warm weather gets here. Global warming, can't have enough of it. I'm all for it. Let the temperature rise a few. I want to plant my garden. I want to lay down in my lounge chair. Right now, nothing better would be for me to go out today, which I can't because it's going to be in the 30s. Lay down on the lounge chair in the hot sun and get a suntan and just that natural vitamin D in there, kill every UVB rays, which kills virus and stuff, and just feel great, So anyway, that's the rant on that part.
Good morning.
Moving right along. Yesterday, this is just a weird thing, kind of semi-embarrassing or something. I was talking about a movie for those who saw this yesterday. And I kept saying it was a John Huston film. And I was trying to explain my management style, and I was trying to compare it to a character in a movie, and I couldn't. I was convinced it was a John Huston film, and I couldn't think of the title. But then, like usual, afterwards, I was talking to a friend of mine, and then realized the movie was The Player, and it was an Altman film. Now, both Altman and Huston are were great directors, but stylistically different. Altman was that guy who was constantly, just had the camera here and people dialogue. One of his trademarks, people talking over people. If you ever watch like old movies, dialogue, someone says something and then the next person says something. But in real life, you don't do that. You talk over each other. That's why I like cell phones, because there's like this weird delay sometimes in cell phones. I mean, it's nominal and it's hardly noticeable. But did you ever talk to somebody and you find that there's it's not as good as an old telephone, where you can't have the conversation. You almost, you end up doing, okay, no, go ahead, you go. Yeah, go ahead. Instead of it being, natural. And anyway, so Altman's style he was one of the first directors to basically take it to that point where you talked, the characters would talk over each other the way it's in real life. And when you see a lot of independent films, one of the flaws they make for filmmakers out there trying to do this is really annoying. And you see a lot of these on like Netflix and Amazon Prime. They're so desperate for content. They just have these independent films that they fund. And you'll see that it's a sure sign of bad direction. And it's not like the actors necessarily might be bad, but they need to see some Altman films. It makes them they just look like amateur actors, because it'll be, yeah, I was over there just before. Where were you? Well, behind the garage. Oh, I see. Instead of it being, instead of the conversation in real life, it constantly overlaps when you talk. You might not notice it, but the next time you're having a conversation, see if it sinks into your head. And if you're trying to make a movie, or you're into that kind of thing, watch an Altman film, or be conscious of the dialogue, because there's nothing more I just turn the movies off. And sometimes, they got some good looking girls on it, potential, star quality and all that kind of stuff. And, some of these cinematographers are half decent, then they could put, art direction, the frames set up pretty good frame wise, but they blow it with the dialogue. You just go, bat, cheapo, low budget film. And maybe it wasn't even that low budget, all things considered. Take the cap off. Yeah, it's
Good morning.
So yeah, I'm struggling through this thing, trying to figure out. Hopefully, I can beat this if that's what I have. But anyway, so back to that. So The Player was the name of the movie by Altman, and the Tim Robbins character was the one I was talking about. I mean, that was my management style, like at a lot of places where I worked, particularly like the radio station that I was talking about at the time. And people either deal with that and you're usually very successful at that. But you've also, a lot of people are like very jealous of you when you do that because they can't keep up with you. They don't understand what you're doing. They don't know that you have all this stuff in your mind and you're just constantly moving around. And it's like, yeah, okay, right, great. And they think you're not paying attention to them, but you're listening to them. It's just that it's like, you got the important stuff in your ear. You don't have, look, we don't have to talk about this for 20 minutes, man. I got it. Okay. I know what you're saying. Fine. Great. Go, and that pisses people off. They don't know that. That was like Steve Jobs, the problem a lot of people have with Steve Jobs, because he had a clear-cut idea. He was an idea man. And he had a clear-cut idea. He did understand the computer business, but he wasn't an engineer or anything like that. He wasn't even a coder. But he knew it. He understood it. And that's important. And that, in any kind of management situation, that's the key, is you don't have to be, you can manage a steel plant. All right. But you don't have to have grown up, working with smelters and, pouring slabs of steel and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to know anything about it. I mean, in that regard, as far as what it's like to do it. And some people say, oh, no, yeah, you do. No, you just have to basically understand the process, understand what's going on, understand what everybody's job is, understand what you're trying to produce, volume, profit and loss, how the operation, that kind of thing. But you don't have to be a steel worker or have been a steel worker or a former member of the steel workers union to be the manager of that. And I'm just using that case in point. It could be a clothing factory. It could be whatever, and a lot of people are resentful of people like that who come in. But those people at the top are usually very successful because that's what they focus on. They're focusing on the business. They understand exactly what's going on. They understand what the worker is saying, but they get annoyed when the person won't sit down with them for a half hour. It's like, I don't have time to sit down with you for a half hour. I see what you're saying. You're saying, yeah, that's it. Okay, great. Good. All right. And either you do that or, I'll get somebody to take care of that. Now move on, go back to doing whatever the heck we pay you for. And they hate that stuff, so they get jealous of you. And they talk about you. But there's nothing they can do. And so that's what happens. And like I say, that was Jobs's thing. He had clear-cut ideas and he pushed people. Towards the end, he figured out how to do it by closing instead of, he closed in the group of people that he used to communicate with so that there was less of a broad misunderstanding of his management style. And the people that were close to him, he would they knew what he was saying. And so he would communicate to them. They would communicate to him. And he had a good communications system going. And that's when Apple was most productive. Unfortunately, right before he died. But that's when it was like, bam, the iPod, bam, iTunes, bam, the iPhone, bam, apps, bam, Apple Music. I mean, he changed the course of history, literally. And it was, and yet he was not an engineer or a software writer, so a coder. But in his mind, he knew the technology. He knew what their capabilities were. He talked to the engineers and he said, no, I want something like this. And then they'd bring him, and then something would come and he goes, well, who the hell can carry that down? Who's, I don't want that. It has to be small. It has to be this way. I don't want to have to, have looking like a Walkman or something. I want it to be ergonomic. I want, just to be able to work with just your thumb. And some engineers and people look at him like, you're crazy. It can't be done. And his style was, you're fired. Basically either do it or
You're fired.
And people couldn't relate to that. And that was my management style too. On a much lower scale, obviously, but I worked for a couple of companies where we were doing in the millions. So it does make a difference. So anyway, we covered that. I have a little bit of huffing and puffing going on, partially because I'm talking nonstop, but partially because I think I might have gotten this Kung flu, maybe, or the flu. I just don't know. But this has been a couple days now, and it hasn't gotten worse. So I figure I'm just going to keep up the regimen I talked about earlier, and that should take care of it. So who knows? But I think it also could just be, the seasonal flu. Because last night I was feeling like crap when I laid down in bed. And, or I got up around 10 o'clock because I went to bed earlier than that. And I got up and I was feeling like shit, like my head, like I said, I got a thermometer is coming in the mail today, but I don't have a thermometer. So I probably had a fever. I don't know if I did or not, but my head was like just weird. And I was fatiguey, that kind of thing. And so, and I didn't have any, I have a two-story house. And I didn't have any, I was all out of aspirin upstairs, but I have aspirin down in the kitchen. I hate going, once I go upstairs, I know I don't like coming downstairs because I don't wear shoes upstairs. I try to keep that place clean. So I got to put on, and I don't, I usually have socks on when I have my shoes. So it's like, you got to put socks on because I don't want to put my feet that I'm going back in bed into some shoes that I don't know. Anyway, I decided, okay, go through the hassle. You need to take 2 aspirin. Today I'm going to buy some aspirin and Tylenol. So I go downstairs and I grab 2 aspirin, take them, come back, lay down, and I don't know how long it takes aspirin to take effect, but 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was. I started to feel much better. So, which makes me feel that this is more of a, just like the flu kind of thing, as opposed to, if it was something more, more deadly, if it was the Kung flu, But yeah, I mean, it's out there. I don't know what the game is, but it's kind of really screwed up.
Let's get this show on the road.
All right, so we covered all that stuff. That the rhetoric was politics. It's like the some of the late night shows. My little note card for today's show. But today, a friend of mine's going to come down. I'll have to wear a mask when she gets here. And we're going to go shopping probably to the Dollar Tree. And I know, there's nothing like the Dollar Tree. You go in every time. I mean, it's never failed. Never failed. You fill this basket of stuff and you come out, you check out. And when they say, $12, or whatever the tax is, you're like, or whatever, like you can't spend 20. It's almost impossible to spend $20 in the Dollar Tree. And you come out with 2 bags of stuff, And some of the things that they sell for $1, ridiculous. Like I have a leaky roof. And I can't get on it because I said I had 2-story house, but it's technically 3 stories because I have like this finished attic. I bought this house. It's a 100-year-old house. And I think the first owner, there were only two previous owners, and they were all single guys like me. And I guess the first guy probably built it. Um, and I think it's a Sears house. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but back in early part of the 20th century, late 1800s even, Sears and Roebuck, there was this catalog. And it was a real big, thick catalog. If you ever remember the New York or Philadelphia or Washington, Chicago, the big city phone books, they were always like this thick, even thicker, right? And the Sears catalog was like that. And it was everything under the sun, and you can order it. And, you could mail it in. There was a form in there. You could mail it in and, get it delivered. Or I think you were able to call an order too. I'm not sure. Once the phone was invented. People forget that, just, about, what is it? 150 years ago, a little over. I mean, people were using like a telegraph, and even when the phone was invented, it was like they were few and far between, their phone. And as the phones even went around, the whole concept of the pay phone, it'd be like there would be a phone at the general store. There'd be a phone at maybe a diner, the police, of course, the emergency people had a phone, doctor had a phone. But I mean, it was like slow rolling. It's like I was saying before, when Rome fell, Rome had aqueducts and running water and toilets, actually. Multi-story buildings, stairwells, shopping centers, the whole 9 yards. It's really not like when you watch like some old movie like Cleopatra or something, and a bunch of people just in togas throwing fig leaves out or something like that. I mean, yeah, they wore, but it was the crowning achievement, civilization. And, the houses, especially when you see like from Pompeii where it was buried, the inside of these houses were like very elaborate, I mean, mosaic tiles, I mean, it was, you wouldn't know, apart from electric, they didn't have electric lights, put it that way. But apart from noticing that there wasn't a light switch or a light at the top of the room or something, if you were thrown into one of those places, you would actually say, wow, you would be thinking you were going into a wealthy person's home, right? So, lifestyles of the rich and famous is what I'm saying. And so anyway, so flash forward 2,000 years later in America, and people were using outhouses, right? We didn't, the average person, didn't have indoor plumbing, in most rural communities. They were using outhouses. So you think about that 2,000 years prior, I mean, the wealthy people in Rome had their own bathrooms and their own baths and all that kind of stuff. But, for the masses, they had public baths and toilets and stuff like that. And like I say, the aqueducts bring, fresh water and all that stuff. But in America, yeah, the affluents, Hearst, who ran the newspaper monopoly, and Carnegie and Rockefeller and, all those types. Even Roosevelt, he came from a wealthy family. Those type of people who lived in the mansions, yeah, they had indoor plumbing. But the average American, back, like I say, 2,000 years after the fall of Rome, they were using outhouses. or like pumps, pumping their water and then bringing it in the house, doing washers. My grandmother, my grandparents' house, they had a wringer washer. So obviously they had indoor plumbing and stuff, but it was like, I wish I had a pic. Like I said, if I would have thought of it in advance, I had a picture of, but it was a washing machine that the first iteration of it, you had like foot pedals on it. And it was like, imagine just a cylindrical, if you open up an old fashioned washer, an upright washer, not one that has the door in the front, one that you lift up the thing, right? Well, imagine just the inside of that, and the whole thing was a cylinder. So how it spins back and forth. Well, the first versions had foot pedals on them. And, it'd be like if you ever saw an old fashioned sewing machine before they became electric sewing machines, they used to have foot pedals on them. And you would work the pedal, and that would make the needle go up and down. And that's how that was a sewing machine. And the washing machine was the same way. You put your feet on the bottom and you did this, and that made the thing go back and forth. So that was a big advancement from washing your hands on a wringer washer, which was basically a tub with this weird thing, and you just soak your clothes in a tub and then kind of like, not wring them, I mean, rub them against this thing and then hang them out on a line. Well, the wringer washer, eventually once electricity got around, you put the water, the water went in there, you put your wash and your soap in, and that, did the agitation back and forth. And at the top, there were these two rollers, roller and a roller. And you'd put your clothes here, and the roller would squeeze. Your clothes would go through those two rollers, and that would squeeze it dry. But then you still had to put it out in the line to dry. My grandparents had one of those. So, think about it. And so, we've come a long way in a very short period of time. And that comes back, a relatively short period of time. Some young person watching this, or somebody even in their 20s, would say, oh, that's like ancient history. I go like, not really. 100 years isn't long ago. That's a human lifespan. People you see, just look at least a wealthy person's lifespan. See these people, they're dying late 90s, 100 years old. Last couple months, there's been like a bunch of celebrity type of people died. And they all died. They were like 98, 100, stuff like that. So, well, how do you call a human lifespan ancient history? You don't. That means in that person's time, when that person was born, they might have been born, unless they were a Rockefeller, or a Carnegie Mellon, or, they might have been born in a house that had an outhouse and a wringer washer and a sewing machine that their mother had to, work by kicking her feet, stuff like that. And the only way to dry your clothes was to hang them out on a line. That was it. And people just don't get that. And that's what I try to get back with this full circle to this, these people that don't understand the environment and fossil fuels and green energy. It's just, they're simply not aware of the changes that went on in the past 50 years in the US, 50, 60 years even. And how energy efficient our appliances have become. Number one, the average household uses less electricity. Just the whole idea of even contemporary right now with, with smartphones and laptops and tablets. These things are plugging in USBs, they don't use hardly. I mean, you're talking like 5 watt chargers and stuff like that. Maybe something as high as a 20 watt charger for a laptop or something like that. Things have changed just in the past decade. So energy consumption is way down. And so that alone means that it's a cleaner, that contributes to a cleaner environment and cleaner energy. See, energy savers. Monitors use much less energy than cathode ray tubes, the first monitors that came out, like the monitors in the 90s. They were basically these big, bulky tube TVs. Now they're flat screen, LED, plasmas, whatever the heck they are. But they use far less electricity. And it's the same with the computers, So, number one, our energy consumption's gone down. Number two, our cars are way more efficient, energy efficient and fuel efficient, and have various filtration built into it to reduce emissions, of toxins. And most of our plants, manufacturing plants, are the same way. They have, their filtration, and they've reduced emissions greatly. And so the people who are getting crazy and, and just scaring children and whoever, and these people that are binge watch network news or whatever, and beat this drum day in, day out, oh, we got to get rid of fossil fuels. Meanwhile, people are dying, died in Texas and stuff and froze in their houses and stuff because of poor mismanagement of grid, right? And not being prepared, and nothing's going to be done. Do you think they're going to actually update and prepare, or they'll say, oh, that was the once in a, the storm of the century, right? Which I got on a couple of days ago. Now, they love to use that term. It was a storm of the century. No. Yeah. Sometimes you could have two storms of the century back to back. Then which one is really the storm of the century? Or is that was for the storm of the last century, and this is a storm of the next century? People are nuts, man. And they just believe this stuff without thinking. You have to, it's like one of the things I always say, and they were talking about water pressure problems, because see, everything is pumped. This is one of the biggest things that I'm personally concerned about. The water and sewer authorities in most areas have been combined. See, at one time when you paid taxes, that was the government ran what they call the water and sewer that was part of your taxes. They were, in fact, in many towns, the way it worked is their justification for tax, was trash, water, sewer, and street maintenance, right? And of course, they had school board taxes, which, but I mean, that was their whole idea, that it was that you paid your taxes and we took care of these things. All right. Then they decided to start getting rid of these things. So the city said, we're no longer going to include trash in with your taxes. So these private garbage companies, took over. And suddenly you had a new bill, garbage bill, on top of your taxes. Your taxes didn't go down. That's the thing, right? Then they said, okay, we're not going to do, we're going to separate school. We're going to have school taxes, because they created these school boards and hired all these administrators, bureaucrats, political bureaucrats. Well, the bureaucrats needed paid, and they needed offices and buildings. I remember when they built a middle school in my town, I went to a private school, so I never went to it. But I remember when they built it, and it was unoperational. My sister went there. She was 2 years younger than I was. And I remember driving by it because I used to drive by it to go, I think actually to visit a relative's house was on that other side of town from where they built that school. And I remember noticing that there was a school, which was mostly a big gymnasium, with the school built on top of it. But that next to it was this like architectural wonder kind of thing. And that was the administration building. And I can remember driving by there. Actually, there was the public high school was near that where they built that. And they had a planetarium there. And when I was in high school, sometimes, even though we were in a private school, we would go to that planetarium. Maybe, I don't know, once or twice a year, field trip type of thing, day in the middle of the day. And I always was noticing stuff. And I remember looking out the bus window on the way to the planetarium at this new school that they had built there, this middle school. And noticing that, whatever time, 2:00 in the afternoon, 1 in the afternoon, whatever it was. And noticing that there were all these cars on this building. I mean, there must have been like 100 cars. And if not 100, 70 or, more than 50, between 50 and 100. But I think it was like 100. It looked like 100 cars. And that was the administration building. Now, I went to a private school where we had a principal, a vice principal, I think, 2 what they called office, the ladies in the office, right? Behind the counter, one that worked the mimeograph machine to make the tests or something like that. And a janitor, right? That was the school staff. And then you just basically had whatever, a dozen or a couple dozen teachers. That was our school. And people from our school went to a higher percentage of people graduating from our school went on to college and good colleges and got good jobs than these people that had, this administration, 100 administrators in an administration building doing what, right? We had no administrators. We had a principal and a vice principal. Teachers made their lesson plans and stuff like that. I mean, there were certain state standards, and then you had the SAT test, which was a standardized, academic test, or I don't know what the A stood for exactly. But I mean, that's the thing you used to get into college. And then there was, when you were younger, you took an IQ test. And there might have been one test in between. But when growing up, I think I only ever took 3. I think I was only ever tested 3 times, 2 or 3 times. An IQ, SAT, and maybe one other test. Maybe there was some other test, state test, maybe one. Now these kids are tested all the time. And, because these administrators have to justify what they do. It's like politicians, politicians are like, where's our $1,400? They're still clowning around with that. It's February 25th. All right. We've had a new administration in over a month now. All right. This money was promised by both political parties prior to the election. Right. And they still haven't done it. And included in that was supposedly money to help what they called frontline workers, the various masks and things that hospitals and nurses needed, further funding for certain drugs or treatments and even the vaccines or whatever. And they still haven't passed it. Instead, they're holding hearings on the capital, whatever the capital, what they call this January 6th capital thing, which to me, I mean, it's like an unfortunate event, but I mean, I think they're blowing it out of proportion a little bit. I mean, there were some radicals, apparently from both political spectrums, the extremes, both extremists from both sides, agent provocateurs and zealots, what I would call. The agent provocateurs would be from the left. They were hoping it would turn into what it is now, an ongoing eternal news cycle event. And then, of course, zealots on the right that, just couldn't accept, loss, defeat. But they're extremists. There was no, there was a damage, but it wasn't, excuse me. Hi, Cat. Cat just peeked over the monitor with the puzzled look on his face. Who am I talking to? And as far as I know, they caught all the culprits. They arrested them all. Because they got it's Washington, D.C. They got 1 million cameras. So now they're having hearings and they're building walls around public buildings and stuff. It's like, isn't that why you have Capitol Police and stuff? So I don't know. Everything to me seems as if it's not just the old line used to be, it's a world gone mad. It's like, it's all over. It's all over. It's all over. Western civilization has collapsed. The what used to be the United States is now just the states, because you can't call it united. It's divided. It's a divided country. It's not a United States because you get red states, blue states. You got, extremists on both sides, but you still have the Republicans, Democrats totally diametrically opposed to one another. So, and there's nothing going to bring them together because their issues are too dogmatic, too much ideologic. Okay. So, in other words, you're never going to get somebody who's pro-abortion agree with somebody who's anti-abortion. You're never going to get somebody who's pro-gun, Second Amendment, agree with somebody who wants to take everybody's guns away. You're never going to get somebody who's like a, hardline balanced budget person go with somebody who's, spend. You're never going to get somebody who's like, thinks that you can't have mass, immigration, unregulated and undocumented immigration, agree with people that believe that, hey, we're already letting 1 million legal immigrants in every year and they're documented, and that's how all our grandparents and great grandparents came in, took the oath, learned the language, and did it that way. And the list goes on and on. There's all these, I mean, the issues. I don't have to bring them up. So they're, like I said, it's diametrically opposed to one another. So to call it the United States of America is totally ridiculous. Let's face it. California and New York, all right, are never going to be in agreement with Florida and Texas. Doesn't matter if people from California move into Texas. People like, there's all these, people love to make feature stories or editorials or op-eds about, well, the Californians are moving to Texas. They'll turn it into a red state or something. Well, not really. Texas is a pretty big state, you know. But even if they did, so what? Then there's Kentucky, or there's, whatever. There's all these states. So the point is, they're never going to agree. So the United States is over. And now that, the policies that are being implemented now, and, once you have that like list of, stack of executive orders, each up to this point, you had, let's go back to George W. Bush, the first Bush. Okay. All right. He had a foreign policy. He had a domestic policy, right? Bill Clinton won. He only served one term. Bill Clinton won because of, and there was the first Gulf War. People didn't want to get into a war either. But I mean, Bill Clinton was like, it's the economy, stupid, right? Whatever. And so Bill Clinton won. So you had Republican George H.W. lose. And then you had Clinton come in for 8 years. Remember, Clinton was impeached just like Trump was impeached. I mean, it was, it's like the same old thing. It's even like the same old thing, but people, like young people today with their little cute little cardboard signs with their magic marker on, or their banners or whatever. It's like they weren't alive, right? Remember, if you were born in the year 2000, you're 21 years old. And if you were born in, in the late 90s, you're like in your mid 20s. If you were born when Clinton was elected, you're like 91, you're like 30, you're 30 years old. All right. But the first 10 years of your life, what did you know? Because that was the old United States then. You were still had semi the old school system. It was pre-internet, right? So you were probably just playing games and stuff. Being a kid, just doing stuff and actually getting into the new stuff that was coming down. But yeah, you were going to video arcades. That's what they had back then. You were going to video arcades, or you had, Atari and some of that stuff. So what I'm trying to say is that people today, these activists, so to speak, they don't know that you had Republican, Democrat, then Bush, the son, you're right, GW, and Republican, and then Obama, the Democrat, and then Trump, the Republican. And that how Congress changes, was Republican, they had Republican under the Democrat, and, and how it goes back and forth, because their terms are different. Senators are like 6 years, congressmen every 2 years. And so you're constantly changing parties and ideologies. But up to this point, up to now, we're back to a Democrat, up to the Biden administration. There was like a certain sense of continuity of the government, and that the changes were more on, were subtle. Fiscal and foreign policy changes weren't that drastic. They were along what you called party lines. So that ultimately the Congress bills would pass and president would sign them, because there were a lot of people that were what they would say this person is center left, center right. The majority of people in the party weren't extremists. You see, they weren't like hardliners, as they call them, or whatever. They were mostly, it's like you knew who a Republican was and you knew who a Democrat was. But when it came down to the country came first. And so you would say, well, they're center right, center left, or whatever. And, and you knew who the hardliners were, right? Well, that's not the case anymore. So, beginning with, and that's why the Trump years were tumultuous, because the Republicans were hardline on their ideology, immigration, abortion, all these, all these issues. And the Democrats were hardline on the same thing, immigration, abortion, and all these issues. And so now you had Biden come in and sign, I don't know what it's up to now. It could be as high as 100 executive orders. Remember, they don't have to tell you. This is another thing people don't know. There are executive orders and pardons and things like that happen all the time in the executive branch that aren't necessarily publicized and don't have to be publicized. They're not under any, there's nothing that says you have to publicize it. So who knows how many executive orders he signed? 70, 80, 100? Congress seems to be like taking a hands-off approach because, I don't know, politically, I guess they don't want to have, be held politically liable in the next election or something for some of these crazy things they're doing. The ones that want to be center left or something. I don't know. I can't figure it out, be honest with you. So, so if you're 25, 30 years old, you were a kid and you don't know how it works. You don't know about the tricksters. As I started this show, I'll wind this thing down now. I always like to go full circle. You don't know that you didn't get the memo that the rhetoric prior to the last election was just politics and games. You actually fell hook, line, and sinker. Excuse me. For you actually believe that nonsense. You actually believe that you believe the rhetoric. That was just campaign rhetoric. You can't, there are certain things you can't mess with, you can't meddle with the laws of nature, Mr. Beale. And they don't know that that the process has always been, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. That's just the way it goes. Because remember, it's a corporatocracy that are the puppeteers, as I say every morning show, that really run, run the world. They run, everything. And below them are the corporations, the lobbyists, those kind of people who basically write the bills for Congress and senators, and the courts, and then the president. So the president, like I said, is not the leader of the free world. The president, congressmen, senators, and judges are the lowest rung in the in the states, in the American form of government right now. What the states are. Above them are the bureaucrats, because the bureaucrats are there like for life. And they don't follow any. We've seen that happen over the past several decades. They don't care who the president or Congress is. They just ignore them. And they lie under oath when they're brought up in front of committees. They just do whatever the heck they want to. They think they're in charge. They think, oh, well, these elected officials, they're only here for 4 or 8 years. So, we can't, the heck with them. Let's just ignore them. Or they'll do these delay tactics. Like a lot of that stuff was done under Trump recently, if you watched it, or like these people that go for Freedom of Information Act requests and stuff like that. They just like delay it. They get tied up, it gets tied up for years in hopes that somebody else is going to come in office. So then they never have to worry about it. Same with investigations or courts, They just tie things up. They don't want to, the bureaucrats, because who really controls everything are the money people, the corporatocracy, Davos, the World Economic Forum. That's what the Great Reset is all about. So yeah, just to end this, on that is like, that's what we're dealing with right now. The Great Reset is in progress. Western civilization fell already. It's gone. Okay. Not coming back, just like the Roman Empire is not coming back. British Empire is not coming back. Greece is not coming back. Okay. The Mayans aren't coming back. All right. Civilizations gone by aren't coming back. And Western civilization is crumbled. And the United States is not coming back. And there's people, oh my God, 2022 will win back Congress. 2024. It's too late. It's gone. It's not the United States. That's not even true. We're not united. So how do you call it the United States? It's like I said before, when you travel abroad, people usually say, oh, you're from the States. And that statement is more true than ever before. Yeah, you're from the States. These are the states in America, right? Some states in Northern America, 50 states in Northern America. I think they're going to try adding the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. So it'll probably be 52 states in North America. But it's pretty much set up to be a one-party system, and it's an authoritarian state. And that's it, because it's a corporatocracy. And you can forget your ideologies. Those are the differences between people within geographic boundaries and actually neighbors and families and stuff. I mean, the division is so great and is at so many different levels that it's impossible. Like I say, when people get a divorce, there's a thing called irreconcilable differences, right? And that's why that's why the term of their divorce. Why'd you get divorced? It was irreconcilable differences. Okay. Well, how did the United States fall? Right? When did the United States, what was the reason why the United States is no longer the United States? Irreconcilable differences. And there's people, we'll bring people together in unity. No, it's irreconcilable differences, just like a divorce. The divisions are on such ideological, dogmatic, diametrically opposed, things, for lack of a better word, that we have irreconcilable differences with one another. And so all this is the states. So the United States is over. They've already trampled the Constitution, and that's being ripped apart every day. The courts don't support the U.S. Constitution anymore. So what good are the courts? They're political. The courts are political appointees. The judges are political appointees to begin with. And they act that way. Congress, whether senator or representatives, are totally influenced by campaign donors, lobbyists. And so who rules the world? The corporatocracy, the corporations, big tech, big pharma, big ag, the military industrial complex. All right. And what I call the old world order. Forget the new world order. No such thing as that. It's the old world order. It's like neo-feudalism, because it's not, you can't have feudalism in these days. So it's neo-feudalism. It's a new version of feudalism. We're cattle on a tax/consumer farm. And that's just the way it is. Now, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world for us. We'll get into that. There are some cataclysms coming down the pike that we should be aware of. But what it means is that you have to live your life knowing that. See, knowing the situation you're in is very important. Because then you have parameters. Then you understand, what the rules of the game are, so to speak, and how you can survive. And the idea, survive and thrive. And so the idea is that, remember, as a human being, the only thing you really need is food and to hydrate yourself. And it's nice to have a roof over your head to protect you from the elements. But that's the only thing you need. So your number one priority is to make sure that you're in a situation where you have food and shelter. Otherwise, you end up like what happened, when there's a disaster like there was in Texas and many other places. They just highlighted Texas. Realize your vulnerabilities, like power. Look at that great solar stuff site. I only have a couple things up so far, but one of those things would have come in handy for a lot of Texans. I see that the little propane, they have these little propane things. They used to call them like Mr. Heater or stuff. I had one the last place I lived. The things used to cost like $29.95, and then you'd buy this like $5 little canister of propane, and it was good ran for hours, right? Could heat up a room. They're selling those things for over $100 some bucks, man. It's like what they did with toilet paper. The price of toilet paper never came down. I went to buy toilet paper the other day, and it was like $8 for like 6 rolls of toilet paper or something like that. I don't know what it was, but so anyway, understand the things you need for your life, whether you have a family or you're an individual or whatever, and get yourself secure. That's number one. But that's not enough. The idea is you want to be happy. You want to have fun. You want to make life worth living. So make sure you're in a place where you can enjoy your environment. So like I say, I bought a cheaper house because my priority was growing a garden out back and laying down. I've got these outdoor speakers and this little patio I set up, nice lounge chair, and I've got this great music collection. And I could lay out there, do my gardening stuff. I grow my food, eat fresh food all like for more than half the year. And I'm laying out there, I'm listening to some of my favorite music, catching a suntan, getting that vitamin D, UVB rays, just enjoying life, living life, So that's what you got to do, and that's the kind of stuff you should be thinking about instead of like.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Instead of letting people, letting the fear mongers get the best of you, or believing in these people that are trying to pretend that we're not totally that the United States is still the United States. It's not. It's just the States. Western civilization's gone.
Good morning.
Anyway, we'll leave you on that good note. I hope it's a good note. I don't know. I feel a little bit better now after my morning cereal, D3 pills, and some caffeine. So thanks for watching as I type into my chat. And I will see you
Same time, same station.
same time, same station tomorrow, most likely. I don't think I'm doing a TGIF because I was feeling under the weather. I don't think I want to push myself. So it'll just be another morning show. Till then, cheers. Take care.